Hey everyone, so today we are looking at Matthew 9 and Luke 7. And in these passages, we see Jesus healing different people, just having a lot of really interesting interactions with a lot of different people. And what I really wanted to hone in on today was two sections back to back in Luke 7, verses 11 through 23, where he raises a widow's son and then speaks to some messengers from John the Baptist. And so, first off, in verse 11, we see him near the town of Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him, right? And so he sees this woman who is walking next to this man who we find out is her son, her only son, and she's a widow, so she has no one in her life now, no man to care for her. And it says that when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. And that word compassion, it comes from the word for spleen. And so it's essentially saying like he felt it in his gut, like in his spleen, which I think is really cool, to show that Jesus is not just, he's not just a spiritual man, but he's also very deeply rooted in emotions, and that they aren't, they don't guide him, but that he is able to just understand and empathize with people. He has emotions, he has feelings, and again, he's not swayed by them, but at the same time, he does lean into them, and he does know how to use them in their proper context. And so I just think that's really cool and encouraging for us. And so he touches the side of this briar, and then he says, "Son, young man, I say to you, rise." And the young man, the dead man, rises and starts to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother and is like, "Here you go." And just really cool. But what's interesting is that this has happened two times before in the Bible. 1 Kings 17:23, Elijah heals a young child. And then the same thing happens in the story of Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 4. And so they, and the audience that is watching this, the great crowd, right, and the disciples, they're like, "Wow, a great prophet has arisen among us." And so they're recalling this story of both stories of Elijah and Elisha, and saying, "Wow, this is another great prophet." And this also recalls to mind Deuteronomy 18:15 that we've already looked at a couple times, that this promise that Moses gives that there would be another prophet like Moses that would come. And so we have this prophet who is fulfilling the call both of Moses, the better Moses, and also the better Elisha. And so Jesus is fulfilling both of these at the same time, which is really remarkable, right? And so then as we keep going, we see him being confronted by the disciples of John. They reported all these things to John, and John, calling two of his disciples to him, sent them to the Lord, saying, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" And when the men had come to him, they said, "John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, 'Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for someone else?'" In that hour, it says that Jesus had healed many people of diseases and plagues and evil spirits, and on many who were blind he bestowed sight. And he answered these two disciples. He answered them, "Go and tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are healed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them, and blessed is the one who is not offended by me." Right? And so what's interesting is that he is quoting from at least four different places in Isaiah. He's kind of pulling all of these bits and pieces of prophetic messianic imagery from the book of Isaiah. And so in Isaiah 26:19, it says that your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will sing and give birth. The earth will give birth to the dead. Then Isaiah 29, verses 18 and 19. In that day, the deaf shall hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind shall see. The meek shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord. and the poor among mankind shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. Isaiah 35, 5 and 6, then the eyes of the blind shall be open, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. For waters break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. Metaphorical streams and waters at this point. Isaiah 61, verse 1. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. And so this is what John is expecting to hear. He's in prison right now, right? And so he has been, he was, preaching against Herod, and so Herod throws him in prison, and he's really hoping that they are going to bring him news that Jesus is going to deliver him, that he's come to establish that the Messiah that they're waiting for is the Messiah that will deliver them from bondage. And Jesus is saying, yes, I am he. I am the one who is delivering you from bondage, but it's not the bondage you're expecting to be delivered from. It's a much deeper bondage that you are much more impervious to, right? I'm not saving you from Romans, I'm saving you from sin. And even John has to be reminded of this. And so what's really fascinating is that Jesus puts all of these pieces together that in their original context, the way that any Jewish person, any common sense person really would read this passage even today, you would think, okay, he's talking about the end of time. He's talking about the salvation of Israel forever, period. Like he's talking about the destruction of the wicked ones, but also the wicked one, the serpent. And he's talking about the overcoming of all sin and death. And yet at the same time, we're realizing that this is the first piece of that salvation, the first piece of that prophetic undoing. And so Jesus is saying, hold on, there's more to come, but I haven't come to do that yet. It's not my time. It's not time for that. And so do you have the patience to trust me now in what I'm doing today, right? And I think even in our own lives, we can see the promises that God has given us, the expectations that we have, and yet the still waiting. We still feel like we're in prison. We're waiting for the promises to come and break us out of our prison cell. And Jesus is saying, yes, but not yet, right? Jesus is saying that I have more that I want to do in you now. I want to heal you. I want to deliver you from spiritual blindness and spiritual muteness and deafness and lameness, right? And so I have to, if you want to enjoy the freedom that comes from being out of this prison cell, you have to have these senses brought back to you first. And so I think there's something really deep and profound about this, is that we have to experience the healing that Jesus wants to deliver us into before we can be delivered into the promised land that he has for us, right? And so, man, I was not expecting to say that, but wow. And so that's what John is being faced with now. And so that's what I think we need to consider too, is the fact that in his presence, there is perfect punctuality.